Welcome everybody to the Searching 102 workshop, the Advanced Searching workshop. This workshop will introduce you to advanced searching techniques in order to take your research to the next level. So we do recommend that you come to this workshop having already viewed or attended our Searching 101 workshop, which goes over phrase searching, truncation, Boolean operators, etc. We will be building off of that knowledge today. Now we do have a number of learning objectives that are located in your workshop outline. If you do not have your workshop outline in front of you, that's certainly okay. What you can do is go to the Research Help drop-down menu and click on Learn the Library, and then go to the Library Workshop Videos drop-down menu on the left-hand side. This will provide you with all of the workshop recordings, the outlines, and the transcripts. So if you needed to access this outline at any point, you can come down here to the Searching 102 workshop outline. So located on that outline are learning objectives. Upon completion of this workshop, you will know how to access the research process pages for preparing to search and finding similar resources. You'll know how to access and use the library's Roadrunner search, effectively conduct database searches involving proximity, nesting, and selectable fields, effectively use techniques for finding similar resources, including setting search alerts, looking at cited references, citing articles, related results, and looking at the article keywords and subject terms. You'll know how to search within a particular publication as well. So now that we talked about those learning objectives, I'm going to return to the library's homepage and first start out with the research process. So I'm going to go to the Research Help drop-down menu and click on the research process. This is a thorough overview of the research process, starting with finding a research topic and going down to organizing that research. Now this workshop pertains to two sections within the research process. One is preparing to search, and some of these techniques, like I said, we reviewed in Searching 101. And the other section is finding similar resources. So we're going to work off some of these pages today as well. So Roadrunner is what we used also in Searching 101. It is the best starting point for any research because it does search most of the library's database content simultaneously, including articles, ebooks, and videos. Just as a reminder, there is some content that is not searchable from within that Roadrunner search. It excludes databases with special content such as Mergent Online, Reference USA, and Statista. It also excludes those dissertation databases, so if you need full-text dissertations, it's always best to return to the dissertation resources area. But we're going to jump right into our Roadrunner search. I'm going to click on the Advanced Search, and we're going to start talking about field searching. Field searching is discussed under the Preparing to Search area. So if we go down to the field codes page, you will see a description of what field codes are and how to select them in the library's Roadrunner search. So you will see a description of these fields here for Roadrunner. You also see a section on ProQuest. ProQuest will offer many of the similar fields, but some of them may be different. Field searching is a great technique because it's a powerful way to narrow your search results. And a field is simply a specific part of the record within a database. And you're probably familiar with common fields that you may have used on your own, like looking for the author, the title, the subject, the abstract, etc. But I want to show you what happens when we actually use these fields. So let's start out with our topic first and foremost. So I'm going to say that our topic for tonight is leadership and motivation. Okay, so If we were to just do a search here, we would have a pretty overwhelming number of search results. So let's give that a try before we select any additional fields. And I just want to point out, I typically like to point out the research starter, which will sometimes come up at the top of the search results. Now this will appear only within the Roadrunner search results and only if you've searched on a pretty broad level. So here we see a research starter called Leadership and Motivation, and basically what this is a broad overview of the topic. So typically will come from an encyclopedia article, but it is a reliable resource that you can safely cite in your academic research versus something like Wikipedia, which you would never want to cite in your academic research. So I wanted to point out that research starter. And let's take note that we have over 1 million search results. It can be quite overwhelming when not using those fields. So what I want to do now is simply change it to all text. All text is a search that quite honestly I never use, simply because you'll see that we have the same number of search results because we were searching for these words anywhere in either the full text or the record itself. So we have the same number of search results, but if you notice, one thing is missing from this screen, and that is the research starter. So the all text search does nothing other than eliminate a possible helpful resource with those research starters. So I don't recommend using the TX all text search. But let's start using some of these other limiters, starting with the abstract. The abstract is a really effective way of narrowing your search quite considerably and narrowing it to a set of results that seems more on topic for you. Because the thinking here is that if it mentions these particular keywords within the abstract, then those key terms are pretty significant within that article, and it should be pretty on topic for you. So let's go ahead and try the abstract search. So we'll go from over 1 million search results to just 15,000. So we still have an overwhelming number of results, but now we're getting closer and closer to the topic that we are actually looking for. Let's talk about the subject terms. Subject terms are rather interesting because if you're using the subject terms from the drop-down menu up here at the top of the screen, it pretty much relies on your already knowing that the database does indeed use that as a subject term. Because leadership and motivation are such broad terms, I'm quite confident that these are used as subject terms. However, if you weren't sure if a particular term was used as a subject term, it's best to start looking at your search results to identify particular search terms that are used. So here we see some subjects that have been identified here. Let's keep looking for a little bit to see if we see any other subjects. We see educational leadership. Okay, we see some irrelevant subjects here. I see leadership as a subject here. So basically what we're doing is just trying to educate ourselves as to what subject terms are used by the database. Leadership, motivation with psychology in parentheses. We could always copy and paste a particular subject term that we see. But for now, I'm pretty confident that these are subject terms, so we can safely choose SU subject terms from the drop-down menu. Now, what this search means is that the articles that come up in our search results have to have leadership and have to have motivation as part of their subject term. So it doesn't matter if they use them as keywords, if they're in the title of the article. All we're looking at is whether or not they appear as assigned subject terms. So let's go ahead and press search This should really narrow down our search results significantly as well. So now we're down to 12,000 search results with articles with leadership and motivation as the subjects. So this is getting us closer to what we want to get to, but probably we'll end up using a combination of fields and a combination of search techniques in order to get to what we really want. For now, we're just focusing on these fields and how it can change our search results. We can always move to a title search. I typically do not use title searches simply because it will eliminate any articles that could be very on topic for you if they just don't happen to have those words in the title. So we are limiting it just to articles with leadership and motivation, both of those terms in the title of the document. You're always welcome to try this sort of search, but sometimes that will get you too narrow of search results. Here we're not doing too bad because we still have over 1,200 search results. Still, I would probably continue narrowing the search down, getting it more appropriate to what I'm looking for. Maybe I only want scholarly and peer-reviewed journal articles. I could, of course, apply that limiter. We talked all about limits in Searching 101. And we could add in another search term. Maybe we're interested in how creativity affects leadership and motivation. So we could type in the word creativity, or we can use our truncated search technique that we learned about in Searching 101 to pull up variations of the word. So if we wanted to look for creative, creatives, creativity, create, we could truncate that word. Or maybe we're not interested in create. We want to make sure it's just creative or creativity. We could truncate the word that way. So let's go ahead and add that to our search. And that should narrow it down. Now we're down to just 128, which is a very reasonable set of search results. One you can easily get through during a single research session to determine if they're appropriate for use in your own research. Now, just as a reminder, one thing that I like to do to kind of look through my search results a little bit quicker is go to my page options and choose the detailed result format. That will pull all of the abstracts onto the search results screen so you can more easily read about what that article entails without having to actually open up the detailed record page or the full text content. Okay, so using these fields with a combination of search techniques will really help you to narrow down your search results. One of the fields that we haven't talked about yet is the author field. So the author field can be used, obviously, to look for particular authors. Keep in mind that there are many authors with similar or the same name, so I typically recommend when looking for a particular author that you also try to put in a keyword related to what that author writes about. So in this case, I'm going to look for the author Graham Jones, and I'm going to put that Jones, comma, Graham. The issue here is sometimes you might see only the first initial in the record, sometimes you might see the full name. So I like to add in a search term related to that. So I know that Graham Jones writes about leadership, so I'm just going to throw that term in as well. Okay, so we do have 126 search results. If we start looking through our results, I see that Graham Jones is one of the authors here as well. Sometimes you might see different names, like here is an Emma Jones and a Dixon Woods Graham. They might not all be 100% that particular author. So that's sort of how the author search will work. There are a couple of fields up here that we're not going to take a look at, and I'll explain why. One is the SO Journal Title Source Search. This allows you to search for a particular journal title within the Roadrunner search. And we're not going to take a look at this because there's a more effective way of searching within particular journals, and that is using our Find a Resource tool, which we will see. There's a link for Find a Resource up at the top of the screen. We're also not going to do an ISSN search or an ISBN search, but you can use those if you're trying to locate a particular book or a particular journal. Again, I recommend Find a Resource for doing that job. Okay, so now that we've seen how to do those field searches and combine those field searches with additional search techniques that we learned in Searching 101, I'd like to move on to a technique that we did not necessarily cover in Searching 101, which is called nesting. Nesting is a way for you to keep concepts that are alike together and tell the database to choose one of several terms. So let me go back to the research process so we can see an illustration of that first. So I'm going to go into our nesting page, which will talk more about what nesting is, and it will show you an example here. So if we're talking about teenagers, there's a lot of ways that teenagers could be expressed. A teenager or a teen, adolescent, youth, young adult, etc. So rather than having to do multiple searches for all of these different terms, you can actually search for all of these terms at once by using a nested search. So nesting uses these parentheses to keep the like concepts together and to tell the database to choose one of those terms within the parentheses. So here we could look for adolescents and depression, or teens and depression, or young adults and depression, which is actually going to really broaden our search rather than narrowing our search. So let's go back and actually do an example related to our particular topic, which again was leadership and motivation for tonight. So let's say I'm interested in leadership, and let's say that I'm interested in leadership as it relates to motivation. So we have our motivation portion as well. But I'm also interested in how management or a supervisor comes into play. So let's go ahead and do a nested search there. So we could do leader or supervisor or manager or maybe administrator and add that particular portion to our search. So the articles in our search results will need to have both leadership and motivation in them, but they can have either leader or manager or supervisor or administrator. And of course, if we wanted to, we could place all of these terms, let's say in the abstract of the article, just so we're getting a little bit more narrow. And we have over 6,400 search results. But we can continue playing around with this and adding additional terms. So this effectively broadened our search because we were looking for multiple different terms that we would accept in our search. We can add on to this, add on to our search with another nested search. So maybe we're also interested in absenteeism or turnover or job satisfaction, and we'll bring back our phrase searching here. So as long as those terms are within that nest, within your nested parentheses, you're able to add as many terms here basically as you want. There's probably a character limit to these text boxes, but I've never reached that. So you can add in several more terms if you like. So let's update that. Okay, so we're getting there. Now we're down to 1,200. We did not put that one in the abstract, so if we wanted to make sure absenteeism or turnover or job satisfaction were in the abstract, then that gives us a very reasonable set of search results for 19 on that particular topic. So that is how you're going to go about using the nested parentheses to create powerful searches. Next, I want to talk about proximity searching. Proximity searching is a way for you to search for terms based on how closely they appear to one another in the particular article. So proximity searches use operators to designate how closely you want the terms to appear to one another. And we're definitely going to do an example. But I want to point out that with a lot of search techniques that we use in the library's Roadrunner search and other databases, a lot of those techniques are very common, using the quotations for a phrase search, even using the nested search with the parentheses. These are pretty common across the databases. When it comes to proximity searching, these vary significantly based on the database. So if we were to look at the EBSCOhost and Roadrunner, this would show an example of how to do a proximity search. Gale Academic 1 file is different, ProQuest is different, ProQuest dissertations and theses is different, Science Direct, Web of Knowledge, and you can also do this in Google. So just make sure to come here and look at the examples, because quite honestly, the librarians don't even have this memorized off the top of our head, since it does vary so much from database to database. So let's go ahead and try an example. Using a proximity search is a really great way to find terms that could be expressed multiple different ways. The example that we put in your outline is the topic of curriculum theory. So if you were interested in curriculum theory, that could be a term that you search for, but what about theories of curriculum, theories involving curriculum, theories about curriculum? If you look for curriculum theory as an exact phrase, that will not search for these other ways of expressing the same concept. So that's where proximity searching comes into play. So let's say we're interested in employee retention. If we were to just search for employee retention, that would search for employee retention as an exact phrase. But we would like to broaden this with a proximity search. So we could look for the word employee near the word retention. And to do that, we're going to put the capital letter in and then a number of our choosing. So the number I typically use between 3 and 5, simply because the higher the number, that means the farther away the words are from one another. So if we were to do employee in 20 retention, that means the word retention is 20 words away from employee. And that means that the article probably isn't going to be very relevant for you. So we're going to stick with employee in 3 retention. So we'll find the word employee within 3 words of retention. So this would be searching for different phrases like retention of employees, employee retention as an exact phrase. So let's go ahead and do that search. It would help if I spelled things right. There we go. Okay, so now we have 111,000 articles. So in a lot of cases, you'll see the exact phrase employee retention, but look at this term, retention of public employees. Because we searched for the in 3, we found retention within 3 words of employees, so that included this phrase, retention of public employees. Now, if you wanted to broaden that search, you could increase the number. So let's see what happens when we change N3 to N5. This should go up pretty significantly. So it took us up by about 10,000 search results. So you may not always need to increase that proximity number, but you always have that as an option. So here we would maybe continue on with our search as we did before if we're interested in motivation and how it plays into employee retention. We can put that in. If we want to make sure that leader, manager, or administrator component is in there, if we wanted to put everything in the abstract, these are all things that we can just try and see how that works out for our search. So now, again, we've arrived at a really interesting and reasonable set of search results. And again, if you need a reminder of how to conduct proximity searches, nested searches, and use field codes, just return to the Preparing to Search area of the Research Process Guide. So those are the additional advanced search techniques that I wanted to point out. And now we're sort of moving on to the second portion, which is looking at the similar resources. A lot of times, using a single article to locate more resources relevant to your topic is a very effective search technique. And there are simple ways to do this, but sometimes those simple methods can be overlooked. So that is where this Finding Similar Resources section can become very important to you. Like I said, especially once you have already established a key group of articles that you know is particularly on topic for you, then we can use these techniques to go forward and find those similar resources. So we're first going to start out with the cited references, and this is something that you may have done intuitively on your own. Looking at the references cited in particular articles that you have taken a look at can be a very effective way at finding similar research. Now, the thing to keep in mind when you're looking at the cited articles, the references or the work cited that go along with a particular article, the thing to keep in mind there is that they're always going to be older than the article that you're looking at. So this isn't going to be the technique that will give you the most recent research in an area, but it can be very, very related. So if we look at our search results, we go into an article. What we can do is obviously scroll down to our work cited or our references. And I just want to show you what you can do if you do see a cited resource that you are interested in trying to find within the NCU library. So let's say this meta-analysis catches our eye because a meta-analysis is going to include a study of several previous studies that have been conducted. So if we are interested in this, what we can do is copy the article title. We can return to the library's Roadrunner search, and we can simply paste in that article title. So this is another example of a phrase search. We're using the phrase search technique that we learned about. So we can look for this title, which is a long phrase, to see if we have access to that within the NCU library. Okay, so just like that, we see that we are able to access that meta-analysis from 2002, and the full text is freely available. Systematic reviews and meta-analyses, they're really going to have a lot of additional references included, so they can be a really good source of finding additional information. So that's our first technique, making sure we really take note of the references in a particular article that we've already found. But we also want to move forward in time because this is going backward in time, right? We also want to move forward in time. So the way that we do that is by looking at the citing articles. Citing articles are the articles that have come after the original article but refer back to that in their own research. So we do have a page on citing articles, and we do have a number of databases which do provide information on citing articles. My preferred way of looking for citing articles is to use Google Scholar, simply because some of the databases will only have citing information for journals that are indexed within that particular database. So rather than checking each of these databases individually, sometimes Google Scholar is a good way to search sort of across all research that could have possibly cited your original article. We do have a quick tutorial video on using the Google Scholar Cited By feature, but I'm going to demonstrate that now as well. So basically what we need to do is start with the article of interest for us. And in this case, our article of interest is the impact of benefits and services on manager engagement and manager retention in tourism industry. So what I'm going to do is copy that article title. I'm going to open up a tab for Google Scholar, and I'm going to paste in that article title. Just like we did in Roadrunner, I'm going to put quotation marks around that article so it will find it as an exact phrase. And in this case, it wasn't a good example for me to choose because it was such a new article. So I'm going to give it another go. I'm going to go back to our results screen and choose something that's a little bit older, because the goal of looking at the citing articles is to take maybe an article that's a little bit older. We want to see who has cited that article to move forward in time in the research. So let me find something that's a little bit older. Okay, this one from 2013 might be a good one to choose. So I'm going to copy that. I'll return to Google Scholar, and I'll just go back to the home page, and I'm going to paste in that article title. And so now we have our results screen, and typically we should only have one result for that one article. We do have a way to access that full text article, but in our example, we already have this article. We really just want to see who has cited it. And in this case, since 2013, 14 other researchers have cited this article. So to find out who and in which article, I just need to click on Cited by 14. So now we'll see our original article up here at the top of the screen. That will always appear up there. And then all of our citing articles are below. Now, a number of these, it looks like, are available freely on Google Scholar. You can access those PDF full text. But we also have a way to link Google Scholar to the NCU Library. And we do have an FAQ about this as well, if you need a reminder after the workshop. But to do that, we're going to go to the settings in the upper right. We're going to click on Library Links. We're going to type in the word North Central and press Search. And then we're going to select North Central University full text at NCU and click Save. This will return us wherever we were in our particular search results, and here we see a way to link out to that specific article within the NCU library. So just one example in this particular search. Since 14 articles was not a huge number of citing articles, every once in a while you will find an article and you'll see hundreds of citing articles, which may indicate to you that that is a seminal work, something that is very important in that particular field. Once you have seen those citing articles, sometimes you'll see that those articles have been cited, and you can continue looking at related research in that way. Now, in addition to the citing articles, we also have related articles, and that's a separate area of our workshop outline tonight, looking at the related results. Since we're already here in Google Scholar, I just wanted to point out the related articles feature here. So oftentimes this can lead you to quite similar research that could be very, very useful for you. And again, we're seeing the full text links if I wanted to link out to that within the NCU library. The only problem with the related articles is that there is no way to narrow it down by date or add additional keywords. So basically, my best recommendation is to just look at the first several pages. You might notice the relevancy of those articles drop off, and at that point you can just sort of abandon this technique. So Google Scholar can also be used just to do some searching for articles on your topic. You can use the advanced search by clicking this little arrow right here. But the primary way that I recommend using Google Scholar is to look at the citing articles and the related articles. Let's return to our search results screen and talk a little bit more about the article keywords and subject terms. We did talk about subject terms a little bit earlier when we talked about searching by the subject field. But I want to emphasize again for you the importance of examining the keywords and subject terms assigned to your article, because that is definitely going to assist you with locating similar or related sources. So you should be notating these somewhere, however you're organizing your research process, writing down searches that you've done, writing down search terms that you're using. Make sure you keep track of that. We do have a source available on the library's website under the research process. And this is right under preparing to search. We have a database research log that you can take a look at. Basically, it's just a simple Word document, but it is a way that you can jot down the search terms that you've used, the subject terms that you've used, etc., just to make sure you're not going over the same thing again and again or forgetting to conduct a particular search that you plan to do. Okay, so let's look at some of these subject terms. So I see that employee motivation is a subject term that I probably should be using because I see that again down here. I see employee retention and motivation as subject terms. So if these are ones I haven't searched for already, that may be something I want to take a look at. Once you are in a particular record, and that record does have available subject terms, you can always click on them to execute a new search. However, keep in mind that we're just searching for employee motivation or employee retention as the subject, so that could be a pretty large set of search results. So we probably will want to combine that with additional search terms. Maybe we go back to motivation as a subject term as well. So whether you've just done a search and you wanted to start looking at those keywords and subject terms, or whether you want to backtrack and identify those articles that you've already retrieved that are very, very on topic for you. They're great articles. You really want to go back and take a look at those keywords and subject terms for those particular articles. It could lead you to new searches with new related articles. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the related results. We looked at related results when we were here in Google Scholar. We saw those related articles, but a number of other databases have that particular feature as well. So they've automated the process to locate similar or related research, and this feature varies significantly from database to database on how effective it actually is. Let's go to that area on related results. Here you'll be able to see all of the databases in the library that offer related results. So if you were doing a search in Science Direct, for example, you would see this in your search results: related reference, recommended articles. We looked at Google Scholar already. If you were in annual reviews, you would see more like this: users also read. So different databases have different terminology for what they use to recommend related results. The feature does exist in the EBSCOhost databases as well. If we were to go to an individual database within EBSCOhost, we could take a look at that. So let's say I'm interested again in leadership and motivation. I'll just do a basic search right there. Let's say I find an article that is really interesting to me. If I click on that, on the left-hand side you will see find similar results. I feel like this feature is really hit or miss in EBSCOhost, however, because a lot of times it will give you a very large number of search results, and in this case over 25 million. They do rank them by relevancy. We see the relevance sort right here. So you may just want to look at the first few pages just to see, like we did earlier in Google Scholar, just to see if anything looks particularly interesting. Or we might want to narrow that down to just scholarly and peer-reviewed journals to kind of weed out those other resources like records for dissertations or ebooks, that sort of thing. One database where I really do recommend the related results is called Web of Knowledge. Web of Knowledge can be accessed on the A to Z databases, just like the other databases. And if we go into Web of Knowledge, we can either search for a particular article that we have found and we want to find more information about, or we can go ahead and do our search for leadership as a topic, and I'll add another field and do motivation as a topic and press search, just so we can get an example article. On the right-hand side of the screen, we see that there are 115 cited references, so that's the references included in this particular article, but they also have view related records. So if I were to click on view related records, I would see over 68,000 related records, which can be overwhelming, but again, it is sorted by relevance. So we can look at the first several pages, or we can search within those search results, or we can use some of these categories or document types to narrow it down a little bit further. The related results in Web of Knowledge are based on shared citations, meaning the article that we started with has similar citations to this article. Sometimes that's a better way of finding related results versus many of the other databases that find related results just based on shared keywords. So our next search technique for finding similar resources is searching within a particular publication. Once you have begun conducting your research, you may start to see the same journal titles come up again and again. And that's a really good signal that this is a really great publication for my particular subject. Scholarly publications are often very subject specific, as they are written to disseminate research and promote academic discussion among professionals within that particular field. So therefore it can be a very effective search technique, searching within a particular publication. So in this example here, we wanted to retrieve the Journal of Applied Psychology. And we do that using the library's Find a Resource tool. Find a Resource can be accessed right here under the Research Resources, or we can find it right here in the center of the library's homepage as well. Let's say for our topic, for leadership and motivation, this is something that we can do. Let me go back. Here's our search results for employee retention and motivation. If we look on the lower left-hand corner, we see journal titles. If I click on this, I see that one of the journals that's being used, it's called Employee Benefits, one's Incentive, one's T&D, one is Journal of Nursing Management, one's Strategic HR Review. So if I have identified that one of these particular journals is really one that I want to focus on, I could look for this within the NCU Library. So I'm going to copy Strategic HR Review. I'm going to return to the Find a Resource tool, and I'm going to paste in that title. I can leave it as title begins with or say title equals and press search. And here I see that we get Strategic HR Review from 2004 to 1 year ago in ProQuest Central. Now what that means 1 year ago, that means that this particular publication has what's called a 1-year embargo. Sometimes publishers place an embargo on their most recent content. If you ever see this happen, you can always request the more recent content through interlibrary loan. So I'm going to click on ProQuest Central so we actually get into that Strategic HR Review journal. And then we can start searching a little bit more broadly to see what articles come up on our topic within this particular journal. So if I wanted to see what articles involve motivation, I could search within this publication to find those articles. And in this case, we've identified 256 search results. So again, if you have already done some research, you've seen these certain journals coming up again and again. In this case, we identified Strategic HR Review as one of our prominent journals. This is a great way to find related content. Now, the final technique that I wanted to talk to you about is setting up search alerts. And we can do that right here in ProQuest, so I'll return here in a moment. But I wanted to just let you know that you are able to get back here, get back to the research process, that you're able to come to this database alerts and RSS feeds page to look at instructions for creating alerts within these different databases. So basically, just as an overview, many library databases provide the ability to create alerts for content related to your research topic. Depending on the database's service, an alert can provide you with a table of contents to new issues of journals or a list of new articles based on your search terms. Some databases even offer citation alerts to inform you when a particular article has been cited. So setting up database alerts is a great way to find articles related to those that you have already found. So here are individual instructions, but let's return to ProQuest because we've done a search for motivation and motivation within this particular publication. If I wanted to save the search alert, I could save the search or create an alert. So you can name the alert motivation in, let's see, our publication was something about was it Strategic HR Review? Maybe that's what it was. So I can name my alert. I can put in my email. I can put in a message to myself if I wanted to. Then I can choose, like I said, this is going to vary by database, but I can choose my alert content. Do I include the search details? Do I include highlighting? I'm going to change that up. Do I include only newly published documents? I'll say yes. And how often do I want this? I would like this weekly, send on Friday, stop after, I can go up to 1 year in this case. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create that alert, and the alert will be sent via email when new documents that match my search are available. So in this case, I was allowed to create a search alert without creating a personal account within ProQuest, but many of the databases you will need to create a personal account in order to do so. And we do have a page here on personal database accounts, so it will provide instructions on doing that within each of those individual databases. So we've covered a whole lot. We continued with how to use some of the search techniques under preparing to search. We looked at field codes, we looked at proximity searching, we looked at nesting, and now we've looked at these techniques under finding similar resources to expand our research once we have already found some documents or articles that are really on topic for us. We do have a couple of additional resources listed in your workshop outline, a link back to our Search Like an Expert quick tutorial video, which you can access under the Learn the Library area. If you needed a quick reminder maybe of some of those techniques that we did cover in Searching 101, Search Like an Expert definitely isn't a substitute, but it can be a good reminder of what we've covered. And then of course our Searching 101 and Searching 102 workshops you can access here on the Library Workshop Videos page. I do hope that this workshop has been helpful, and I hope to see you in future workshops.